So hello and welcome to I Pretend to Know Things About Mahjong. So Chiral has asked me to review one of his games and to basically determine how much was luck, how much was good choices, and whether ultimately I would have done the same thing. So Chiral is sitting north to begin with. I assume this is a full Hanchan in the it is a full Hanchan actually. In the silver room, so Adepts plus. Let's see what happens. So we'll ignore the initial draws for okay, fine. I was gonna buzz through, because apparently you can't buzz through at the moment. So we're going to buzz through the initial draws here, just move ourselves into turn 5, which is when we should normally get getting ready, and apparently, yeah. Okay, so turn 5 against a early reach from West. Based on the discards, not too much to reveal from this. It's a little bit erratic, actually. I'd probably I know I can see the hand, but I'd almost be tempted to consider 7 pairs or a closed weight, just because they seem a little all over the place. Middle Manzu tile, close terminal, so I guess low Manzu would be the possible risky thing. You always want to consider the tiles around the reach tile to be dangerous, and especially the tiles discarded just before it. So low Manzu, mid to high Sozu would be the initial read. Safe tiles, if any, low dots, mid Manzu. However, that's not necessarily a definite indication. In any early reach, you have to kind of play your own game around it. It's going to most likely be cheap, most likely be luck based, and most likely be on a closed. In fact, it's a closed 4, but obviously that information is not available. If anything, closed 4 is a Suji to the 1, so that might be a trap later. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, we'll play on from turn 5 and see what happens. So following tile, 9, Suji, and 6 is direct thing from there. Okay. Chiral then goes and discards a 9 dot, which, again, he's playing his normal game, just playing terminals and honors. If he deals in, he does. The only reason I would say 9 is not necessarily good is because it's close to Fedora, and he technically has a couple, so it's not out of the realms of possibility he could do things with that. If anything, I'd say his 2 dot is probably safer than 9, just based on the early 1. That's how I tend to read things. But anyway, we'll spin things on for a little bit. We're mostly just analysing Chiral's play here. We're not going to worry too much about what other people are doing here. So again, dot for 2, which as I've said was okay. This also semi-advances his hand. He's now 1 from Tempai. Unfortunately, West isn't his bonus tile, so he's now got the decision of either drop the pair of alien wins to get into Tanyo only, or progress. So, from this board state, 1 so. Obviously, this is one of the things that is a bit of an unknown. Low Sozu, high Pinzu are the tiles that are most likely going to be in his weight based on knowledge we have. But 2 of them have been played. It's a terminal. And I'd probably do exactly the same thing there. That I would not have done. The problem, I guess, with discarding the alien wins is that they are his wins. So keeping that is fine. I'd have probably been inclined to, though, cut the pair of 2s here. Because he's got multiple pairs, and this does give him 4, 5, and 5, 6, 7. So it opens him up to more easily getting towards a Pinfu from here. Still, he has discarded a 9, which means these 8s are a little locked. But if he's unwilling to discard the Wests anyway, you know, at this point, you either take a risk on the Wests, or you open up the hand and play the safe pair. But again, I don't know whether this is a hand he wanted me to judge on, but we're going to judge him all the hands as to come. And as you see here, immediate backfire. If he'd have gone with the cutting 2s plan, he'd have now had basically Tempai for West 8. Could have reached it if he wanted to, or he could have waited and drawn hopefully a 7. I know he'd be for a 10 because of his 9 discard, but that's kind of the lean to Pinfu that I would have gone for here, because he could have had Pinfu stealth weight. You don't need too much, and he does already have 3 Dora. Pinfu Dora 3 is really strong on a stealth weight, which it kind of is. 6, I mean, just considering here, if he still had the 9... It's awkward. I'll concede it's awkward, but he really wanted to cut either the 2s or the Wests here. Okay, he manages to keep the winning tile, which, as I say, it's kind of tempting because it's a Suji. But, again, manages to hold on to it. It's also a useful middle tile for whatever he's doing. This is just something that happens on Mahjong Soul an awful lot more than it should. But anyway, So there's extra Condor, and I think at this point he is just folding out. He's got safe discards in the 6-5. Yeah, he's just discarding safe tiles at this point. So he has completely folded, which makes sense. There's a lot of points at risk here. Although he is now 1 from Tempai again, if he can make the red dragon pass. Decides to go for green, which we know is safe. Unfortunately, red is safe, but he's got no way of knowing that. It's still a live tile. Don't get rid of it, because it could easily be what they're actually waiting on. And yeah, no real mistakes here. Just playing out the hand, I think. Which I imagine is going to go to a draw. It is. Right. So no real errors there. I mean, yeah, I'd have moved the hand slightly differently to try and add Pinfu. I might have taken a gamble on the West, but I can understand with the West reach why he didn't. So, we're going to again skip first 4 or 5 turns. Okay, so we're 6 turns in. So, it's based on his initial discards. He's kind of moving kind of sensibly towards Tanya. He discarded the 6. Let's just get back 1 turn here. So, he discarded the 6 from here. I would have, if anything, discarded the 6 bamboo over that, just because he's got the more easy double run, but I suppose he needs the 5 in any case, and he does have the Sanshikyu as an option. So, okay, Sanshikyu makes sense, if that's what he's aiming for.
No.
Unfortunately, there is a win before he gets to another hand. I don't see how he could have made a quicker hand than that, in all honesty. And what he was aiming for made sense, the 4-5-6 Sanshikyu side of things. Alright, so East 2. Let's again skip the first 5 turns, just because...
No.
Alright, that's just unfortunate. Now, my plan with skipping the first 5 turns is because most of it's just going to be initial setup unless something unusual is happening, and his hand didn't look unusual. It looked like a fairly autopilot-y first 4 or 5 discards, and occasionally you have people winning, but if they win early, they normally win cheap. And there's nothing Chiral needs to worry about now. His gap to the lead isn't that substantial. It's 10,000. That's a Mungan. No worries. Dealer Mungan is a thing. So we're going to again skip 5 turns. So, progression from here. His hand is kind of a bit of a mess. In all honesty, long way still to go. Green Dragon Call on the left from the dealer. Let's just see how this goes. So 9 dot makes sense. It's another one of his external tiles. He's keeping the south because it's his own wind. And we'll probably cut the 1 here, depending. No cuts the east, which we know is safe from an earlier discard. People are very aggressive on Mahjong Soul. It's an observation, and I've played a lot of Tiles of Confusion, so I'm used to this level of aggression from people. But the advantage is this tends to lead to cheap hands. Okay, so I'm just going to go back a little bit here. So, yep, thank you. So that's the call there. So against 2 calls from this position. Here we've got to wonder what the benefit is of calling here. So he's got a couple of options here. He can call the 6-7-8, 5-6-7, or the 7-8-9. If he calls... What did he actually call, sorry? He calls... Okay, so he calls the correct thing in context here. But I would argue this is still an error. Because, ultimately, the person to the left is looking like they're on a dot Honitsu. However, they didn't throw an early 6. That means they're on for something a little unusual, or they're going for green only. You could argue it's cheap enough to go for this anyway. But even with the call having been made, 9 being discarded, which makes sense, he is still 2 from Tempai. In fact, is he 2 from Tempai? Drop 5, drop 1, yeah. So it's still too far away, and against anybody who's called twice, once you get to the second row, you have to consider them Tempai. Of course, they're not, because they're going for an unusual hand. But you still have to consider that. That's not even counting the fact that the point leader has 2 Han showing. So I would argue that's an error. But I can understand the frustration and wanting to be aggressive here. It's East 3, nothing really has come up. This happens. But he's also locked himself into Tanyo, which means he needs to get rid of the 1-9. And also this 7-9 is still likely to potentially become a completed weight at some stage. He's not confirmed. So, just moving around, nothing too spectacular for the moment. Okay. So, we're now into this point. We know, obviously, from earlier mainly talking about it, that the likely Tenpai happened earlier. He's actually is in Tenpai now on the left. But this 4 is still a bit of a dodgy tile. There's a live discard, in all honesty. And against a live player who has discarded 3 and 5, that means most likely there's a 1-4-7 weight pattern going on. Obviously, not what he's got, but still a thing to be considered at this stage. This 4 is an annoying tile. It is, however, also a useful tile. And at this stage, since you're kind of committed to the Tanyo here, you have to get rid of a 9-7. But we'll see what they do. He does actually get rid of a 9-7, so correct decision on that part, at least in terms of what I would consider things. Unfortunately, as Vitalis has now gone red, the North player has gone into a silent Tenpai. Well, but again, they've made a call. At some point, they're going to get there. Now, I'd argue the 4 dot is more of an indicator of possible Tenpai than the 8 dot, but we had an early 1, so Tsuji of each other can be ignored. This 8 is, in context, the unusual tile, but it's not an easy one to identify because of other things going on. What I mean by an unusual tile is when somebody hits Tenpai, especially when they've made a call, they will discard something unusual, something related to their hand, which they haven't discarded in that area before. Obviously not the easiest thing in the world to identify, and unfortunately, deals in with a 7. Again, not a lot to indicate that, and I can understand that. But again, if he hadn't have made this call, if he'd have decided to hold off and wait, he might not have been in that position anyway. So, again, we'll skip the first 5 turns. This is his dealer turn. And unfortunately, his dealer turn has been met with a bunch of calls, which is never what you want to see as dealer. The worst thing as dealer is to see somebody going for a quick hand. So, discard number 5. Plays his last south. He's still got 1 loose terminal to get rid of. But he's in a good shape here. So he's got Tanyo as his most likely Yaku to have here. He could easily go for Sanshikyu with the 5-6-7. And he's got Pinfu as a potential option. He is, however, up against a double call. And from a look of things, you've got to consider that they probably don't have a lot of value here. Toy Toy is probably it. If they were going for Chanta, they wouldn't have discarded 6 of these. So this is just somebody trying to be aggressive, calling 2 quick things, and is trying to force a hand together. This is a mistake a lot of new players make, because having forced this hand, you now have only 7 tiles, and you still haven't hit Tenpai, and even if you were to get there, at best, you're looking at 2,000 points for getting the Toy Toy. And in fact, you're still 3 tiles technically away from this legal position after 2 calls. That it means these were definitely a mistake. If you had kept the easts, so for example, if this was, say, east-east 7-7 west-west, then there's slightly more validity to it, because you've got a Yaku High for backup, and also your 1 from Toy Toy. So there's that side of things. But anyway, we're focusing on Chiral for the most part, and information that he has. But either way, he shouldn't be worried about a Chanta here. And in fact, he hasn't been up to this point. So again, here's something that I probably would have considered. Well, at this point, he's committing to the 5-6-7 by discarding the second 7. It's still a useful tile for him to have. He's got the pair of 8s already established, though the pair of 4s as well. It might have been worth cutting the 8, but I can understand why he's kept that to try and keep the Sanshikyu going. Ultimately, he's dealer. He's in last place. He needs a win of any type, especially as he's got 2 aggressive players. Unlike the player on the right, the player on the left is someone to definitely worry about. And they have discarded no Sozu, which is always consideration, but also they discarded the 4th man after the second call. We're in the second row now, so you have to assume that second call gets them to Tenpai, and that 4th man has to have something to do with the hand. So, drawing another 4 man discards for 7 here. So at this point, he is undoing his ideal hand, the 5-6-7 3-color straight, for speed. So now he can call 4, 5, 4, and get to near Tenpai. The problem he's got is that his idealized route to Tenpai from here, I know calls have been made, but again, this is the mess of putting yourself into this kind of position. The problem is he's discarded a 9, so we're going to have to be reluctant to get rid of this 8 man and want to get rid of a 7 man instead. Unfortunately, this 7 is not safe. So he's locked on for a Furiten position later. Especially with that draw. So now he's drawn a useful tile here. So he's got the possible Ipeiko, set up nicely for Pinfu, gets rid of the 4. So again, he's got his 8s established for a pair. Ideally, he wants to get rid of a 7, and now he's 1 from Tenpai. Oh, and look, he's managed to get himself into a Yahoo-less Tenpai. In fact, now he's into his Toy Toy. So he's now... Yeah, if you have to make 4 calls to get to it, your hand wasn't really that valuable. And even with this, it's Toy Toy Red 5. Toy Toy Dora 2 in the ideal world, and also a 5 has just been played. So keeps the 8. Again, obviously we're just going to get back a turn here before that. So here he decided that he couldn't make the 7 pass, which is unfortunate because, you see, given board state, I'd almost be tempted to get rid of the 5 here, just because you know it's safe to the left, who's the player you're currently worrying about. So I might have dealt in on this board, just because I'd want to keep my options open for the silent Pinfu. 5 to 8 isn't a bad shape, but you're giving up your pair at this point, which is a really awkward thing to do when you're desperately chasing a win. Discarding the 8 here gives you no pairs, so you've basically gone backwards. You're hoping now on a 5-8, and you already know... Well, that's kind of my thoughts on the process on this. I'd have probably tried to either force the 7 here, or I'd have discarded the 5 and dealt in. But hey. So now he's got another concern. He now has basically all 3 players against him. But the 8 has been determined safe for this turn, so I imagine he's going to follow up that 8. And that, unfortunately, now is locking him into a closed 6-weight or forcing him to discard the 7 for a 5-8. Okay, so not much help here. It's also a live tile. You know the player to the left is likely after Sozu, you know the player on the right is after Toy Toy, and the worst thing you can do against somebody after Toy Toy is play something that isn't on the table right now. Plays it, gets away with it. But at that point, I'd have probably been trying to fold. I don't know what I would necessarily have folded with in this position. Probably the free man. Again, I might have folded... The Toy Toy defense is discard your pairs, so I'd have dealt in. But yeah, I've done so much on this. Okay, he lucks into this. This actually isn't bad for him here. Gets him his Ipeiko, gives him his things, and ultimately he's got a threat. He is up against 3 other winners, but I understand the need to go for this. He's the dealer. Aggression is the thing, and he gets the better weight as well. So Ipeiko, Pinfu, Dora. And gets him his Hanuman. Okay. So with that, he takes the lead. Let's just skip 5 turns, and in fact manages to call Double Ton, and has a pretty good half flush shape built up here. But of course he's got the backup of just taking the 1-3 for his quick win, and I'd just probably toss the West there rather than that, because that's 1 call from a 3-sided Tenpai. And as dealer, 3-sided Tenpais are what you want. I mean, obviously he hasn't played the 2 yet, but it's still cut the West, cut the Dragon when you can. Especially as the later you leave it now, the more risky it's going to get. And yeah, he's being cut out of his winners at this stage. This is what you have to maximize the things you can actually call on that help you. Having 2, well, basically 3 loose tiles at this point is not a good place to be. Especially as people are now being aggressive into your dealer turn. Also, you'd cut the green there. The 6 still has some things you could have drawn that would have been useful on that. And you just got indication the green was safe. In fact, had you cut the green, you'd have had 6-7, cut the West. 2 routes into Tenpai. Nine, not much help, but also relatively safe. Yeah, so there's your second green as well. So... Again, I'd have cut it a little earlier, but you're still not there yet. So 147 and green for Tenpai, which is the last green. No, actually, there are no greens left. So you've got 2 safe tiles if you want them. Player to the left is on for simple Sanchiku, potentially. Although with all the 5s used up, I think. Is there another 5 used up? No, you can't. Well, there is, but you can't see that, so. And he's now called to put himself into a closed weight of the 5, which... Again, getting into Tenpai as dealer is important, but there are probably better ways you could have done with that. Anyway. Into South 1. So halfway through the game, you have the lead of the game here. And fairly standard start. Nothing too much to speak of from there. No calls that have been made. Draw dragons, which you don't have any of to worry about at this stage. And again, hands building up quite nicely. You're quite close to a possible Itsu. And have backup plans in case that doesn't come off. And in fact, it is coming off here. So you're 1 away from possible Itsu Tenpai, which would be a 3-sided weight if you needed to do that. And correctly, yep, not locking that in, just going for the best options. That unfortunately kills any chance of... Okay, so that killed any chance of the Itsu, and that is probably a correct call here. Go to toss for 9, go for the Tanyo Tenpai, which he does. Correct decision making there. It is aggressive, but ultimately, it pays off. Cheap hand, but again, you've dealt with the Kandora there by just being aggressive and getting the quick win. So, onwards a few more turns here. So, quick call here. I think he's looking at just getting a quick Toy or Tanyo, which again is fine. He's in the lead. He wants to end the game quickly. He is 3 wins away from it, so it's fine. It's a little more aggressive than I tend to play, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it in this position. The risk he's got is that the player in second is not that far away from him, but as long as he's only concerned with getting in the top 2 positions, that's an okay mindset to have. It would take a direct buyman to change this point gap, so he doesn't have to worry about dealing into the other 2 players as much, unless they're dealer, which currently is not the case. At this point, getting rid of his closest rival's last dealer turn is slightly more important. So, the problem with the Tanyo hand in this position is that his discards... I mean, you might get the 2s, but he's got 3s and 5s he's racing on, which are less likely to come up on a normal table. We'll see how this progresses. Okay, drops for 7, 1 from Tenpai. Hoping to get the 6th side of this, obviously, but... Ah. Ooh, why did you discard that 9? Hold on. Well, I know why, because obviously he has no Yaku, but obviously this is now putting him into a Fura 10 position. So... It's tricky here, but I'd probably dealt in, discarding the 3. Again, I'm mentioning in this sort of review that I would have dealt in a few times. I probably would have discarded the 3 here. I see one example of... I'm not getting any definite Tenpai indicators here. With some exceptions, I suppose. And ultimately, it's important to kill the dealer off here. So, you can't get Ipeiko from this. But you could still potentially mark your way to Pinfu if you could adjust some things. So... I don't know. There's also a chance you get the 6-9 swap, so I suppose discarding 9 isn't a problem in and of itself. You're already going to be through a 10 for this weight anyway. I just would have been inclined to play the 3 earlier, that's all. Even here, he's keeping the 3. Which again, correct decision, but I probably would have got rid of it. There's no reaches on the board, nothing that's directly... That's what you worry about. But, yeah, there he goes anyway. I mean, same result, but I would have dealt in earlier. 2,000 points, and that means he is now in second. So, skip on the first 5 turns and see what we're looking at. So, not a bad little setup here. He's not too far away from getting a Tenpai, and he needs to knock the dealer off. That basically needs to do it now. So, culling all the Manzi tiles where possible, and it looks as if the player in last is making a lunge for some form of finished hand, as is the player in third. This is to your benefit, because obviously it means that there's less chance of your main direct rival being the dealer at the end of this turn. So 8's useful enough. 2 I might have been inclined to keep just for the off chance of a 1, 2, 3 plus the pair of 1s. But that's probably fine in context. And actually you go straight to reach from that anyway. So reach only with no backup. Nothing really to back you up. But a 2-sided 3-6. Just looking back at your discards, though. So the risky discards are going to be anything near your 2, your 8, and probably low to mid Sozu. With your safe tiles being entirely Manzi based on the fact that you've been discarding them entirely from the first bit of it. They're middle tiles for the most part. So it's obvious if the opponents are reading you correctly. But we'll see. Fortunately, your opponent is also in Tempai at this point, but it's still a correct decision to go for it here to try and at least force the player to fold, or to just maximize any benefit. You in fact needed to reach anyway to get anything, so there was that. Okay, so a cheap win, which is enough to overhaul and give you a narrow lead. You've dealt with the main opponent's last dealer turn, so she's only got 2 wins left to go through. Well, I mean, obviously she could win twice and overtake you anyway, but you know, she's got 2 hands to get a winner unless some luck happens. So early Dragon Call, and we're going to resume from turn 5. So hand's still a little bit of a mess here, but you've got a closed weight there, plenty of loose tiles. That white dragon might be a mistake in context because your hand's just not close enough to take advantage of it. Which is the mistake you make with early calls. If your hand isn't in a good condition, you've limited your hand, removed 2 safe white dragons later, which might be important if, say, the North player reaches. And you badly do not want to deal into her at this point. That being said, you got 2 calls in, been aggressive, and you're now Tempai on the 3 dot. And if you can win 2 quick hands, you do win it all. So there is that argument, and I'm not saying that the passive not calling would have been correct. I'm saying I probably would have waited. So here you've actually split off your winner. Yeah, you're not in a position to win at this point, and you were earlier. Hold on. Sorry. I meant to track that. You were in a position... Yeah. So you actually gave up a Tempai for some reason here. You gave up the Tempai on East. East is not the round wind. I know it's live, but the only person who's really going to take a benefit from that, unless they're in a 1-suit hand or a specific thing, is going to be the player currently in the dealer position. And if you deal this player in dealer position, it's annoying, but it's not that bad. It's not even the Dora. Actually, no, it is Fedora. What am I talking about? It is Dora. So, yeah, it's risky, but I'd have probably still gone for it on the basis you have Tempai. But anyway, a couple of turns on. And ultimately, she's able to pick up the win from there. Not that it's too much problem in context, but it means there's another go around. Yeah, I don't know. I feel if you've called twice, you want to try and force it to the end, but maybe there's an argument you're forcing things too far. Anyway, so 6 turns in, we have a reasonable setup, but you're up against a reach from the player in last. So, what we can tell about this reach is that high dot tiles and low Manzi tiles are the risky ones, but she probably doesn't want anything in the low Sozu region. So 4 is safe, based on that. Discards the 1 for the definite safety, though. And that's probably fine, because your main plan at this stage, you only have 1 loose tile, so 1, 1, or 9, or honor. So Tanyo is probably an okay thing to go for at this stage. 3 is also directly safe, and so many Sozu discarded out of the East player. Who has decided to go Khan mad again? And still discarding safe tiles at the moment, which is perfectly valid. Because, of course, you will lose the lead if you deal into somebody. Again, though, 2 calls and a Khan, and not even in Tempai. In fact, 3 calls and a Khan, and not in Tempai. You are very much superior to these 2 players. Unfortunately, all your luck is drawing you Sozu tiles right now. The 5 probably could have cut for the 9, although the 9 wouldn't have been a safe tile where the 5 is. So, yeah, avoiding the dealing is important, and that's kind of what Kairos decided to do here. Again, fair. If he does attack, his hand's not actually close enough to take advantage of that. He still needs at least 2 to get anywhere, even at this late point in the game. So this is very much a fold position. And as luck would have it, which it really shouldn't have with 3 calls, he's actually going to be dealer at the end. So he actually does progress the game. Actually, no, he didn't. Oh, he changed it to 4-4. That was no 10 with 3 calls a while back. Alright, so Sal 3 repeat again. So, starting from 10-6. So, reasonable calling hand this one if you can get the white dragon early enough. But if he doesn't get the white dragon, the hand's still likely to progress anyway, so... It's a little bit extreme to push for a half flush here. Especially with calls on the board already. But if he can get any of these up to triplets, then he's doing alright. Okay, so here, I'd say that 6 is an error in context. I know North... Actually, you've played a North, so why did you not cut another North? It's absolutely useless to you. You have the 4-6 here, which gives you another closed option. That feels like an error in terms of how you're trying to build this hand up. Especially as you need any kind of win to get you into dealer position and give you the opportunity to close out the game. Okay, so North was called, but a turn later than it would have been otherwise. And keeping the 6 would have given you the 2-4-6 pattern as well, which is better for getting calls. As it turns out, White Dragon's going to be locked, but this is why you don't assume your hand will ever be successful if you need 1 Yakuhai pair to do a triplet to get anywhere. That being said, he managed to get into the silent 7 pairs. Cheap hand, of course, but enough. He doesn't need a big value. He's done the correct thing there, and he can move on to a better weight at that point if he needs to. Okay, early call, because ultimately... So, this is fine. He's the dealer. Any win gets him there, and his hand is full of pairs. Absolutely no objection to him going for a calling spree here. The only problem he's got is that he's got 2 5s. And in most circumstances, pairs of 5s will not be available to you. That being said, that means he's now in Tenpai for the 2 of them. If you can draw 1, or somebody is silly enough to discard at mid-5 at some point in this against the Toy Toy hand, it will be lied anyway. Okay, so your 3 calls, your Tenpai, reach across the board from player in second. This is going to be the end game regardless. That's kind of indicator of this. You really can't fold this one. The only thing you can do is possibly change your weight into a 2-sided. But because of the reach, he has to discard anything and gets the win there. So, 11-6, and that is my quick review of Chiral's game, which he did win. I made some comments, I made some nonsense. This will be on YouTube in a moment. Until then.